So MicroStrategy was just rejected from the S&P 500, but not for the reasons you think. Literally everyone has been making videos on this topic today because everybody wants to know what is going on with the price of MicroStrategy. What is going on with the price of all of these other Bitcoin treasury companies like Metaplanet and Nakamoto? But nobody has figured out the real reason for why MicroStrategy was just rejected for entering the S&P 500. Now, I even made a video on this topic yesterday, and I showed you why MicroStrategy would be rejected today. That was because at the very last minute yesterday, the NASDAQ, the $21 trillion NASDAQ came out and said, yeah, you know what? We are changing our rules. We are increasing our scrutiny on these publicly traded companies putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet to boost their stock price. I told you yesterday that this was bad news. I told you that the S&P 500 would reject MicroStrategy, but it wasn't until earlier today that a light bulb just kind of clicked for me. And all of a sudden it made sense. Why would the NASDAQ want to stop competition and stop more publicly traded companies being listed on these massive exchanges like the NASDAQ and the S&P 500? Again, MicroStrategy is already listed on the NASDAQ. This is the 100 largest companies in America. What this does is it essentially creates a moat. It gives MicroStrategy a monopoly to the publicly traded markets. And if MicroStrategy is one of the only Bitcoin treasury companies allowed to trade on the NASDAQ, and again, they're still on the NASDAQ right now, what does this create? Well, it creates a lot of centralization. It creates a honeypot. And today, MicroStrategy, they hold over 650,000 Bitcoin, and that is about 60% of all of the Bitcoin held by the 150 publicly traded companies. And today I'm going to be revealing why blocking other publicly traded companies from being listed on the NASDAQ is going to only create an even more centralized honeypot where MicroStrategy becomes the only player in town. And this only makes sense when you start thinking about things adversarially. Now let's begin entering this rabbit hole with what Tom Lee just said about the US government and how a government like the US might acquire Bitcoin for their strategic Bitcoin reserve. Again, this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory. This is going to sound like a wild theory, but I'll ask you, it's been 9 months since America signed the executive order where they promised they were going to begin buying Bitcoin for the country. Why have they not bought Bitcoin yet? Why has Bo Hines coincidentally left America? He was formerly the White House crypto advisor. Why did he leave without an explanation only 2 weeks ago? And why did Scott Bessent, the very next day after Bo Hines left, why did he go on the national news and said, yeah, in America, we're not going to buy any more Bitcoin for our strategic Bitcoin reserve, but we are going to continue confiscating assets. And oh yeah, we're going to increase our strategic Bitcoin reserve through confiscating assets. All of this starts to make a little bit more sense when you hear the words of what Tom Lee recently said in this interview.
Is this like your base case? Do you think that the government will acquire Bitcoin by just acquiring one of these companies?
If I had to war game that, there's 600,000 Bitcoin in MicroStrategy.
Yeah, on the way to more. Gosh, that's so fascinating. I have so many questions. Okay, well,
I have so many questions as well, and I have a little bit of a deep and dark rabbit hole to take you guys down today. Because again, all of this just doesn't make sense when you think about things logically. Why was the MicroStrategy not included into the S&P 500? When you look at it from a market cap perspective, let's not forget that MicroStrategy only needed $20 billion of market cap to get into the S&P 500. Let's check in. They've actually got a market cap over $70 billion. And let's not forget, MicroStrategy was one of the 10 companies in the entire world that saw more than $10 billion worth of profit for Q2 2025. So by the books, there is no logical economic reason for why MicroStrategy was denied entry into the S&P 500 today. This is why we're going to have to start considering some alternative theories that might reveal the truth as to why MicroStrategy was rejected entry into the S&P 500. And I actually think it's bullish, and I'm not the only person who thinks that. Before I get to British Hodl's tweet, I want to kind of walk you through this step by step. Because yesterday when the NASDAQ came out and announced that you're going to now need shareholder approval before going out there and tapping the public markets and raising debt to buy more Bitcoin, to boost your stock price, all of a sudden this got me thinking, okay, wait on a minute, who are the largest shareholders of MicroStrategy? Of course, BlackRock holds 5%. But who's the largest shareholder of MicroStrategy? Well, it's Vanguard. Don't you think that's interesting? They're a very popular Bitcoin critic. They will refuse to offer their clients Bitcoin ETFs, which again is a strange move coming from the multi-trillion-dollar asset manager. But this starts to make more sense when we have a look at what the NASDAQ did. So again, I covered this yesterday. NASDAQ tightens grip on crypto security. For anyone who missed that video yesterday, the nuts and the bolts of it is this line right here. The report indicated that the NASDAQ is now requiring certain companies to obtain shareholder approval before issuing new shares for crypto purchases, potentially slowing the recent trend of firms transforming themselves into crypto-focused stocks. Key words there, slowing the trend of firms transforming themselves into crypto-related stocks. So what does this do if the NASDAQ is able to even delist stocks or suspend trading of companies who fail to comply with these new requirements? This creates a moat. This creates a monopoly. This gives MicroStrategy an iron fist hold over the Bitcoin Treasury market. And let's have a look at what MicroStrategy said themselves 3 hours ago. We can see the tweet. NASDAQ's new position on digital asset treasury formations doesn't affect strategy, our at-the-money operations, or other capital markets activities. So they will be unaffected. But who will be affected? The rest of the public treasury companies. I think all of the other 150 odd companies listed here on bitcointreasuries.net, I think these guys are going to be the ones that will be blocked from entering the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. Again, very important, Strategy is already listed on the NASDAQ. Until they're delisted, I think that this wild theory might be true. Now, again, I get it. A lot of people are going to call me crazy. I've got another clip to play for you guys in a moment that makes a little bit more sense. But again, which companies are blocked? Which ones am I less bullish on? Have a look at the rest. How many of these 186 now publicly traded companies that have Bitcoin on the balance sheet are listed on the NASDAQ? We know that Coinbase is listed on the NASDAQ. Don't you think that's interesting? Coinbase and MicroStrategy. Who else is listed on the NASDAQ? Not many others. Again, is Coinbase getting special treatment here? Is MicroStrategy getting special treatment here? Maybe. And again, I think that's the crux of this rabbit hole. I think nobody is paying attention to just how significant this move could be and just how much this will benefit MicroStrategy's reflexive flywheel effect. I truly believe that there could be some ulterior motives here as to why we're now seeing MSTR blocked from the S&P 500. First, I want to look at something else that interested me. Before I get into the reflexive flywheel, you would think that this being some of the most bearish news of all time, that this would send MicroStrategy crumbling. It should be cratering in price, right? No. This is the chart of MicroStrategy right now. And I'm not going to go drawing any lines on charts. Maybe I'll draw just one line on a chart. But what I will say, this chart doesn't necessarily look bearish to me. This chart nearly looks bullish to me. Who's front running this news? Who right now is buying MicroStrategy because they understand that this could actually be bullish? Again, I actually think that this is potentially creating a moat for MicroStrategy. I think we could be in a world where the next million Bitcoin that are accumulated, maybe 900,000 of those are bought by MicroStrategy. And I get it. I know how crazy that sounds. But just think about, I think all of it makes more sense when you start thinking adversarially. This is going to create a massive honeypot. And again, what if, again, hypothetical thought experiment caps on? And Anne here makes a great comment here, the Trump ETF. That's right. Trump's launching an ETF. Are they going to war with BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF? That's a rabbit hole we'll explore in a moment. But think about things logically. If you were a government and if you were planning on confiscating the Bitcoin of publicly traded companies, and again, confiscating is an inflammatory word. Let's say nationalizing. If you were a government planning on nationalizing companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet, would you want a MicroStrategy with 1 million coins on the balance sheet, and then there's another 50 companies, all with 50,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet? If you wanted to confiscate a large majority or nationalize so that you get exposure to Bitcoin through nationalizing a lot of these publicly traded Bitcoin treasury companies, wouldn't it be a little bit more difficult to nationalize 50 different companies with 50,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet? Of course it would be. It would be so much easier for you to sell the idea of getting exposure to Bitcoin by just making one small little handshake agreement with Michael Saylor. And if he holds 80 to 90% of the Bitcoin held by all of the publicly traded companies in the US, that would make your life so much easier, wouldn't it? And again, we can see that this is kind of what we're seeing right now. We're already seeing that MicroStrategy has the moat on the market. But what most people are missing, a lot of people are calling me crazy, but let's not forget, the US government just bought 10% of Intel. Don't you think that's interesting? What does Intel create again, guys? Semiconductor chips. Right now, 90% of the chips used in the Bitcoin mining machines, the ASICs, they're created in China. So America, literally a month ago, just normalized the idea of taking a strategic stake in a company because of national security. Again, these guys are just a semiconductor manufacturer, essentially. Obviously, Intel's a lot more than that. But Trump just normalized the idea of nationalizing a company. Again, nationalize, that's a strong word. They've bought a 10% stake. But again, this is all where the game theory goes. This is the 4D chess. So let's break this down for some of you guys who didn't see this. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said the US government has taken a 10% stake in Intel. As Trump expands control over the private sector. So to the people saying that it is impossible for a company like MicroStrategy to be acquired by a government, What I'm going to say is, hey, I don't think it's impossible. I think it's likely. And I think we even have precedent for it happening. Because literally a month ago, we've seen it play out with Intel. Literally. Intel announced that SoftBank would make a $2 billion investment in the chip maker. Now, again, what's interesting about SoftBank? What's interesting about Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick? Howard Lutnick's portfolio has a 40% MicroStrategy allocation. Again, there could be a tinfoil hat around here somewhere that I need to put on. But when you just start seeing all of these dots lining up, it's really difficult to not just draw some lines between these dots. It just looks awfully suspicious. And what do I always tell you guys on this channel? If it looks like a duck and if it quacks like a duck, it's a damn duck. This is a duck. This is how I believe the US is going to get its strategic Bitcoin reserve. Again, the timing of Scott Bessent going on the news just last week and saying we're not buying any more Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, but we will continue confiscating. That was his direct words. I'm not paraphrasing, direct quoting him. We will continue confiscating assets and adding that to the Bitcoin strategic reserve. I know it sounds crazy, and again, it's really interesting here. When we start putting together these dots, I think there could be some hidden reasons for why the MicroStrategy price actually looks bullish right now. Because I think that maybe I'm not the only crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist who has stumbled upon why the NASDAQ has suddenly, literally 13 hours before MicroStrategy was supposed to be added into the S&P 500, all of a sudden did a 180 and changed their rules. This rabbit hole is a deep one, and we've got a lot of digging to do. I want to first talk a little bit more about what Sean just said in the chat. Tom Lee already said it publicly last month. I showed you a short snippet of that interview with Tom Lee in the beginning of today's video, but I have a little bit more to play for you. And again, we're going to try to get a really well-rounded understanding of what this might look like from a game theoretical aspect. Let's listen to a little bit more about Tom Lee's wild theory.
Preserve.
Right. And we haven't seen that yet. You know, I just thought of something. I think I heard you
Why haven't we seen the strategic reserve yet? Why not?
on a show being asked about how the United States might acquire Bitcoin and going out into the market. I mean, that would definitely move the price. So didn't you say something about the possibility that the government would actually instead try to, let's say, buy a company that has a lot of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that makes a lot of sense. I think the day the U.S. says they want to acquire 1 million Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin's price is going to go up parabolically.
Right.
Because how is the U.S. going to buy it? I mean, they can't, you know, if you know their wallet, you're going to see every buy, you know, and it's going to become a national pastime for everybody because they're a long buyer. I think it's going to be easier for them to buy large holders of Bitcoin. Maybe even give tax amnesty, right? That's why they're saying it's tax-free. We won't tax capital gains. They'll do everything they can to try to acquire Bitcoin. Maybe, but MicroStrategy has a sovereign put. They have 600,000 Bitcoin. That's the easiest way to get to 1 million Bitcoin.
Well, so how would that work, though? I mean, for people watching that think, like, property rights, hello, I mean, those are enshrined in our Constitution. Would a company have to sell to the government as long as they're willing to pay fair market? I mean, like, could they essentially nationalize a company? I mean, how does it work logistically?
Well, the U.S. has a history of acquiring and paying for strategically important things.
They just did so with the rare earths. I mean, the Pentagon deal with MP, I feel like it's not nationalizing it, but it's a strategic move.
Yeah, I think the U.S. government takes a private sector approach to that. So if MicroStrategy is at 400 and the clearing price to do that deal is 3,000 or something, it's probably cheaper to do that than to try to buy 1 million Bitcoin.
What do you think Michael Saylor's reaction to that would be?
We're going to get into Michael Saylor's reaction to that in a moment, but I want to kind of double down on this point. If a company or a nation state wanted to buy Bitcoin, what would happen? This is what would happen to Bitcoin's price if America actually followed through with what they said they were going to do when they signed that executive order in early 2025. They didn't think about what would actually happen to the price of Bitcoin. Again, it is not wise to announce you're buying Bitcoin in the public market until you have your position, until your bags are packed, or until the company that you want to nationalize has enough Bitcoin that you'd be happy with. It wouldn't be wise to announce that you're publicly buying Bitcoin. Of course, I don't think that day is going to come for another 2 to 3 years. I don't think that the governments have packed their bags until this chart on screen, somewhere around there or there, who knows, hits zero. I don't think until Bitcoin on exchanges hits zero, that's when we find out what the real price of Bitcoin is. That's when I think we start seeing the real announcements of strategic Bitcoin reserves and investments from the big boys and from the nation states right now. I think I know that this sounds like a wild theory, but we have to think, how does something that was a certainty only last week get backflipped so quickly? There's a 91% chance MicroStrategy would be added into the S&P 500, and that's because the pure economics of it was so obvious. They were so much bigger than the other companies added to the S&P. The other companies added to the S&P, they're a joke. If you compare them and the amount of revenue they make and their market cap compared to MicroStrategy, they're an absolute joke. Okay? This is again where we have to start thinking about things with a little bit more of an adversarial mindset. So who are the other stocks that got added to the S&P 500 today instead of MicroStrategy? Let's have a look. Robinhood, okay. Household name. But what the hell is AppLovin or MCore? I mean, who are these companies? And why did they get added to the S&P 500 instead of MicroStrategy? Again, I'll remind you, MicroStrategy's Treasury, it's number 8 in the world right now. MicroStrategy is a household name. Let's have a look. It is literally one of the biggest treasuries in the entire world. If we have a look at just how much money MicroStrategy is sitting on, it's absolutely huge. Okay, it's somewhere around their total market capitalization right now is like 80 billion. But if you have a look at the cash on the balance sheet, this is the chart I was looking for. Apologies, it can be a little bit slow at 6:30 at night. The chart I'm looking for is one showing that MicroStrategy's treasury compared to Apple's or Alphabet's, it's absolutely massive. It really does rival some of the biggest treasuries in the entire world. Let's keep scrolling down. Because again, this is an outdated chart, but it's showing you it's bigger than ExxonMobil. It's bigger than General Motors. Again, don't you just think it's interesting that Intel is on that chart? Wait on a minute. Isn't Intel the company that just got acquired by the US government? Huh. Just another one of those coincidences that makes you go, what is going on here? Is there a plan? Is there a deeper, darker plot? This is another chart. This is a more updated chart showing us where MicroStrategy is. I'm going to try to share that in a moment for you guys. But what I think is really interesting is just how quickly the Overton window seems to be shifting. Again, 5 years ago, MicroStrategy had a $1 billion market capitalization. They were worth less than $1 billion. Now, today, in 2025, they're nearly worth $100 billion. And their treasury puts them in the top 10 around the world. Think about that. How many companies have bigger treasuries than MicroStrategy? Right now, MicroStrategy's actually climbed this list a little bit higher. They're actually, if I would have a look at a live look at where MicroStrategy's Bitcoin holdings are right now today, $70.9 billion. That's MicroStrategy's holdings today. If we jump back on over to our trusty little chart, where are we? Where would $70 billion put us? It would put us right here, just below General Motors, but above Exxon, Nvidia, and PayPal. You think that's massive? I think it's huge. And again, this is some of the puzzle pieces that I think people are missing. And this is why I think we're going to start seeing some really strange divergences in the price of Bitcoin, Metaplanet, MicroStrategy, and a lot of the other very popular Bitcoin treasury companies and their stock prices. Before we get there, I want to play one more little snippet of what Michael Saylor thinks or might think about being acquired or nationalized by the US government.
I'm not Michael Saylor, but I know that his personal holdings of Bitcoin he'll never sell, right? And he'll let them essentially become, he'll help permanently help Bitcoin's legacy because he'll just let the keys expire with him. But for MicroStrategy shareholders, he might have a different view because at the end of the day, he'll probably weigh where he can get MicroStrategy versus someone making a hostile takeover bid. I mean, it's just hypothetical. So,
well, I mean, is this like your base case? Do you think that the government will acquire Bitcoin by just acquiring one of these companies?
It only makes sense. It only makes sense. And again, we've got some incredible comments. Sean in the chat, Japan will nationalize Metaplanet. I tend to agree, and probably sooner than you think when you start considering Japan's debt problem that they're currently faced with. And Sean here makes another really interesting comment. Bitmine is structuring its company so it's 100% American compliant and can be nationalized in the future. It's actually brilliant. This theory, I haven't seen anyone else talk about this theory. I thought about it earlier today, and I thought, hang on a minute. MicroStrategy being rejected from the S&P 500 is actually bullish. It gives them the monopoly or the moat. And again, I'm going the extra step by saying why I think they're being given the moat. That's where the tinfoil hat comes onto things. All right. When you start thinking about things step by step logically, why is MicroStrategy being given this moat? The only logical explanation I can think of or come up with that makes rational sense is if it is your plan to confiscate the Bitcoin in the future. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a moment because there could be a rabbit hole we go down when we start thinking about what some members of the US Treasury, like Scott Bessent, have already said about Bitcoin, because he's openly said it, the quiet parts out loud. He's kind of made it known what America's game plan is going to be. But when we start thinking about things from a zoomed out 4D chess perspective, I think these theories get all the more interesting. That's what I will say, because what's China doing right now? China's doing their flip-flop, Bitcoin
the large gold holding. I doubt we're going to revalue it, but we are going to keep it there, again, as a store of value for the American people. We've also started to get into the 21st century, a Bitcoin strategic reserve. We're not going to be buying that, but we are going to use confiscated assets and continue to build that up. We're going to stop selling that. I believe that Bitcoin reserve at today's prices is somewhere between 15 and 20 billion.
And Mr. Secretary, all of these ideas to monetize the asset side of the balance sheet.
So Bessent said things really clearly there. He said the quiet parts out loud. He said, no, we're not going to sell gold. All of these rumors and speculations that people are making, where we have senators like Cynthia Lummis saying that a budget neutral way America could use to buy Bitcoin would be to revalue the gold higher, take the profit and buy Bitcoin. Bessent said, no, it's never going to happen. Said some other interesting things in this clip.
America, is that partly the beginnings of this sovereign wealth fund that you spoke about in your hearing back in January?
I think that these are all standalone ideas, and that as we get more into them, it will require legislation. We'll do it through statute to create a fund to hold these and to oversee them in a good way for the American people, for future generations.
Okay, so Bessent, again, he said the quiet parts out loud. They're going to continue confiscating Bitcoin. Here's a breakdown of his tweet that I think got a lot of attention that we should take a little bit of a peep at. They will hold the $15 to $20 billion in Bitcoin they already have, and they will confiscate more. Makes sense why Bo Hines resigned now. Again, I'm not the only one who's thinking that interview was just strange. Really strange. The United States will never buy Bitcoin. But then what's even more strange is Scott Bessent came out on his own personal Twitter account literally 3 hours after appearing on Fox News Live. And he said, whoa, actually, this is what he said 3 hours after being on the national news. Oh, whoa, actually, the Bitcoin that's been forfeited to the federal government will be the foundation of the strategic Bitcoin reserve that Trump established in his executive order. Again, the backflip. In addition, Treasury is committed to exploring budget neutral pathways to acquire more Bitcoin to expand the reserve and execute on President's promise to make the US the Bitcoin superpower of the world. Why the backflip? Why the pivot? Did he know that he slipped up on the national news? I seem to think he did. I see everybody talking about MicroStrategy. Everybody's talking about the price of it. Everybody's looking at trading these Bitcoin treasury companies, and I think we're missing the forest for the trees. Maybe there's a deeper, darker reason why a lot of these treasury stocks have been aggressively selling off over the past 2 months here. Again, I don't know. Maybe there's other reasons why Metaplanet's down 70% in the past 3 months. Who knows? I'm going to get into looking at all of these charts in a moment. I'm also going to be having a really interesting look at what El Salvador is doing by buying gold. To Jake's comment in the chat, El Salvador just announced a huge purchase of gold. I think it was $50 million, which is actually more money than they've ever put into buying Bitcoin over the past 2 years. Strange, don't you think? It's incredibly strange, and we're going to get into having a look at that, as well as a few of the great comments here in the moment, because look, there's a few people talking about paper Bitcoin in the chat. Before we get into all of those charts and more, I will remind you, please, if you're holding any MicroStrategy, if you're holding any stock or ETF, I just encourage you guys, make sure you have the majority of your net worth in one of these. This is a hardware wallet. And if you don't hold a hardware wallet, that hold your own Bitcoin keys, you do not really own the Bitcoin. You're not sovereign. This is why I always encourage you guys to get your hands on a Bitcoin hardware wallet. Again, look at these things. This is a touchscreen Trezor. There are so many great hardware wallets in the space for you to get your hands on. This is also a Ledger, another touchscreen. Look at that. Turns on even if I haven't charged it over the past, month. Okay, that's pretty cool. Again, Bitcoin, it really is as simple as that. Taking self-custody, I don't think it has ever been easier. So again, if you do want to get your hands on some Bitcoin hardware wallets today, I'd encourage you guys to check out Trezor. I think they're a great option. They've been around for 13 years, and they're going to give you 5% off anything you want to buy if you use a promo code Luke5. Super easy to remember. Rhymes with puke. That's Luke, Luke5. And that's going to get you 5% off anything you want to buy. And then again, if you want to grab a Ledger, check them out. There's also a link down below for those guys. Again, I've partnered with both of these companies because they're the longest standing Bitcoin hardware wallets there is in the space. So again, put your Bitcoin into your own self-custody. Go and grab a hardware wallet. Ledger's actually running a promotion this week. They're going to give you $80 of free Bitcoin if you buy a Ledger Stacks, $70 of free Bitcoin if you get a Ledger Flex, $50 of free Bitcoin if you get a Ledger Nano X. Again, they were running a promotion last month. If you missed it, now is your second chance to get your hands on a little bit of a Bitcoin kickback whenever you buy a Ledger. So again, check out that link down below and start taking your custody of your Bitcoin so seriously. Again, I know a lot of people watching this probably have a lot of MicroStrategy. I've told you from day one, a ton of you guys have outperformed me. I'm a pretty simple guy. I hold Bitcoin in self-custody, that's it. Okay? I think too many people are trying to be a little bit too cute. Now, I'm not saying MicroStrategy stock price is going to crash. I'm not saying that the other Treasury companies are going to continue plummeting. I honestly don't know. I do think it's interesting, though, this theory. If it is true, well, this would actually be even more bullish for MicroStrategy if they were given this hypothetical moat. Okay? So maybe that's why MicroStrategy comparatively looks a lot healthier than some of these other Treasury companies like Metaplanet or like Nakamoto. Look at this. Look at this. This is David Bailey's Treasury company, so to say. It's down 91% since May. It's brutal. It's a bloodbath out there. I know a lot of you guys are wondering what is happening. Maybe there's a reason that MicroStrategy's chart comparatively looks a lot different to the other Treasury companies. This is MicroStrategy's chart. Now, again, I'll zoom out. Just give me a second. I always tell you, I never cherry pick charts. I'm going to zoom out. I want to look at the past 6 months of MicroStrategy. It's been somewhat sideways. But what I will point out, MicroStrategy is only down about 38% from its recent all-time high. A lot of these other companies like Metaplanet are down 70 or 90% in the case of Nakamoto. That's a comparatively much bigger. I think that's an interesting rabbit hole. That's what I will say. I think it's a really interesting rabbit hole. All I'm going to say is if you're holding anything, whether it's Bitcoin or MicroStrategy, or what I will say is that if you're holding Bitcoin, all of this just becomes noise. Again, there's a lot of theories. Naturally, when the price of Bitcoin is going sideways, people want to try to outperform Bitcoin with their treasury stocks, and a lot of people have been wrecked. A lot of people have bought the narrative that there's going to be thousands of treasury companies, all with 1,000 Bitcoin on them. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I think this theory might just maybe change things just a little bit. Just a little bit. which is why I always encourage you guys to go back to basics, put your Bitcoin into your own self-custody, and just protect it as if it's worth $1 million. Because that's where Bitcoin is going to go in the future. Bitcoin is going to be worth millions of dollars. So the small amounts of Bitcoin that you hold today, I think, will become generational wealth. I've been saying it for years on this channel. I think 0.1 Bitcoin will be generational wealth. I got laughed at when Bitcoin was $10,000 a coin, saying $1,000 will become generational wealth. I still get laughed at today, but I will say that 0.1 Bitcoin is worth $10,000, $11,000 today. So again, I want you guys to start protecting your Bitcoin as if it is worth generational wealth, because it will become that way in the future. Now, again, another question I've actually gotten over the past few months is, Luke, what happens if I hold one of these things, like a hardware wallet, and somebody breaks into my home and forces me to unlock my hardware wallet and give up my Bitcoin? It's a fair critique. It's a fair answer. There are some solutions to that. Now, there's actually a solution I want to let you guys know about. And that's, of course, multi-sig. Now, again, multi-signature Bitcoin wallets, they're a lot more complicated than single signature Bitcoin wallets. If I want to move Bitcoin out of a single signature wallet, I only need to sign the transaction with one key. That's how an attacker could theoretically come and try to steal my Bitcoin from me. But if I have a special wallet set up, that's a multi-signature wallet, where I have 3 keys and I need to sign a transaction with 2 keys, and they're in different locations in order for me to actually move Bitcoin out of the wallet, this is naturally a better security setup. The only problem with multi-signature wallets, and I learned this the hard way in 2020, is they're a little bit difficult to set up. I spent probably 2 weeks setting up my own DIY multi-signature wallet on Electrum all the way back in 2020. Which is why I want you guys, if you're interested in setting up a hardware wallet, just go check out what Bitvault is creating. They're a brand new Bitcoin company that is aiming to protect humans beyond keys. They've created this application that enables you to set up a multi-signature vault, and you can do it in a matter of minutes. Okay, so again, if you do want to check them out, right now they're a brand new company. They're going to offer you lifetime access to the application for $199. I think it is an absolute steal for the extra added layer of security a product like this is going to give your Bitcoin. They say that your fortress against physical attacks and hacks is a multi-signature vault. They use time-delayed transactions over multi-sig wallets, and I think this is the best shield for your Bitcoin. So again, check out Bitvault at the link down below if you guys want to set up a multi-signature wallet. It literally took me minutes. I might show you the process of how easy it is in a future video. Now let's have a look at whether MicroStrategy is in fact stable in their price. Let's take a little bit of a look. Now, I actually think like today, they're actually showing pretty positive signs, considering how bearish this news is supposed to be on the face surface. Again, I tell you guys, I'm never going to draw lines on charts. We're not a technical analysis channel. I think technical analysis is astrology for men. But I will say, hey, I don't know. It doesn't necessarily look bearish. That's all I'm going to say. Maybe somebody knows that this news of MicroStrategy not entering the S&P 500 isn't quite as bearish as you think. CB in the chat. If the US confiscates my MicroStrategy shares, how will they compensate me? How will they send me a MAGA? You'd hope to get more than a MAGA hat if they confiscated your Bitcoin. You'd hope so. I think they're probably going to give you, they're going to give you dollars. Like when you sell your MicroStrategy shares right now, you get dollars, you don't get Bitcoin. Nathan in the chat, the US has already done this with gold during the Great Depression. Absolutely, don't forget. Don't think that this is a wild theory and it can never happen. It's already happened, it's been done. It's absolutely been done before. Absolutely, it's been done before. If you guys have been enjoying this wild live stream, I would encourage a smashing of the like button down below and a subscribe. If you guys do want to be notified when I do these live streams or interviews or videos or anything, if you're subscribed, you might be notified when those drop. I think McLovin here is a sound point. I don't trust any politician, government official. I do, however, trust self-custody Bitcoin in cold storage. Couldn't agree more. It's the only thing you can trust. Self-custody Bitcoin in cold storage is the way. Shouldn't be trusting a bank. You shouldn't be trusting a government. The government will time and time again show you that you should not be trusting them. I just think this news about Intel more recently kind of reveals their true intentions here. I think this is a little bit of a hint that nationalizing companies is now becoming normalized. And I think it's only a matter of time before maybe we start to see some Bitcoin companies nationalize. Again, it's just a theory. It's a wild theory. I get that. But I just wouldn't be trusting any government. Sitting on, if I was holding 100% of my net worth in MicroStrategy, boy, I probably wouldn't be sleeping easy at night. I certainly wouldn't be sleeping easy at night. Again, I think Bitcoin is the solution here. Just doesn't make sense to hold anything else other than Bitcoin. I always tell you guys, never sell your Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to be worth millions of dollars. Every bit of Bitcoin you sell today, you'll probably regret. Again, if you are looking for ways to avoid selling your Bitcoin, I always encourage you to check out what Firefish is doing. They have this really cool product where it's like a Bitcoin peer-to-peer lending product. They use multi-signature vaults. So you actually, again, to the point of this channel, retain custody over the Bitcoin. So again, if you are looking to get some liquidity against your Bitcoin, check out Firefish. They're pretty cool. I got a couple of loans with Firefish myself. I love how they work. I'm actually going to be using them to buy a home in the next couple of months. Got some exciting life announcements to share with you guys pretty soon. But I won't be selling my Bitcoin to buy a home. I've told you from day one, property is a shitcoin. And selling Bitcoin for a down payment for a home, terrible idea. Borrowing against your Bitcoin responsibly, of course, much better idea. So again, if you guys do want to borrow against your Bitcoin, I always tell you guys, Firefish is the best answer. They're going to give you 30% off the fees on your first loan if you use a promo code Luke. Again, we're not talking about 0.1% of fees saving, 30% of your fees saved if you use promo code Luke. I think they're the real deal. Check them out if you do want to borrow against your Bitcoin so that you never have to sell. Again, it's pretty crazy. A lot of people say, oh, MicroStrategy is this TradFi asset. It's entering TradFi. Well, to my knowledge, you can't borrow against MicroStrategy yet. Not easily for the retail folk. This is where Bitcoin is just ahead of the curve. We got some fascinating comments here. No more free money to industry. Oh, the UK is absolutely going to sell their Bitcoin. They are absolutely going to sell their Bitcoin. I've actually got a UK refugee with me right now. My new right-hand man is from the UK, and let me tell you, he's not confident in the UK government holding onto their Bitcoin. I believe Firefish is global, guys. Ooh, uh-oh. McLovin. McLovin's a real OG. He must follow me on Instagram. If you do want to follow me on Instagram, God forbid you don't want to do that. But if you do, I slap my handle in the chat here. With all that said, guys, I've been going for 50 minutes. Stay tuned. So many people are making videos on MicroStrategy, but I haven't seen this thesis. It's a thought experiment shared. If you thought it was useful, share it around. I honestly don't have a dog in the fight. I don't mind. I will say enjoy the rest of your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Might pop some more videos up on screen somewhere around here, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay frosty.